Good morning. I'm Mike Weaver, and I'm sitting in for my friend Cynthia today. Off the coast of Ireland in late winter, 1748, a sea captain is in peril. He awakens in the night to find his vessel, the Greyhound, swamped by giant waves, foundering in a monstrous storm so terrific that he and his crew and their cargo of West Africa slaves are destined for watery graves. Engulfed in horror, he cries out to God for mercy and salvation, and miraculously, the ship is spared, and all make it safely to shore. And the captain, after publicly giving God thanks for saving his life and for professing his faith in Jesus Christ, the captain continues on in the sinful, despicable trade of kidnapping and selling human beings to the highest bidder. Among the wonderful folks in the first congregation I served was a wife and mom and her teenage son whose commitments to Christ and his church were examples for all of us. But the husband and the father of that family was never around. Larry, I would learn, was an up-and-comer. He was a commodities broker. He taught economics at Georgia State University. He was the CFO for a coal mine in Kentucky. Late one afternoon, while piloting his Cessna back to Atlanta from the coal mine, Larry undershot the runway at Hartsfield Airport. His plane was totally destroyed, but miraculously, Larry walked away with only cuts and bruises. The following Sunday at the close of worship, Larry came forward and tearfully shared his testimony and his vows to God to amend his life. It was a beautiful moment. And in the Sundays to follow, Larry was front and center, helping, giving, supporting, encouraging. About 10 or 12 weeks later, I noticed Larry in his absence. At length I phoned his home, and in a tired voice, his wife said to me, "Oh, don't worry about Larry. Larry is fine, Brother Mike. All he needs really is another plane crash." In the Gospel of Mark, chapter 8, we find what is, at least to me, one of the most instructive brief moments in all of Scripture. Let me read it. So Jesus comes to Bethsaida, and there people bring to him a blind man and ask him to touch the man. So Jesus takes the blind man out of the village, and he then spits on his hands and lays his hands upon the blind man, and he asks if he can see. The man says, I can see people, but they look like trees walking around." So Jesus laid his hands on the man a second time, and the man looked, and now he could see everything clearly. We see that the initial inbreaking of God's Spirit is not immediate or fulsome. It did not completely resolve the blindness. It was a partial amendment. The man could now see a little better, but then Jesus was not finished yet. There's a lot in this brief encounter with Jesus worth our time, but this morning I just want to note the obvious. Notice that the Son of God is not in any hurry. We learn from the blind man that he was not born blind. He could see somewhat at some point because he knows what trees look like. Could we ever imagine our Jesus saying something like, "Well, you know, there was a time when you had two perfectly good eyes. But you messed up, didn't you? You didn't take care of them. This is your fault. You don't deserve any better." Such hurried and hurtful words don't sound like our Jesus, do they? Do they sound more like the impatient, short-tempered, and hurtful and hurried words and attitudes we are tempted to in these especially trying days? Well, my friend Larry in Atlanta, he never got another plane crash. He got a motorcycle crash 6 years later, through which miraculously he received a second touch from Jesus. And he began to see his life clearly. And he made some significant changes in his priorities and made of his life a gift and a blessing to his family and to his church and to the community. And the captain of the Greyhound, 8 years after his initial conversion experience in that storm, Captain John Newton met John and Charles Wesley, the founders of the Methodist Church. And through them, miraculously, he received a second touch from Jesus. And he could see his life clearly. He became a clergyman and a passionate opponent of slavery. And he would praise the patience and the grace of the Lord in what would become a famous hymn. "Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see." Perhaps all of us need a second touch from the hands of Jesus, or a fifth, or a ninth, or a 14th touch. So what if we do? Let's just not be too quick to accept close enough, to limit ourselves to only a portion of what God has for us or wants from us. Let's refuse any half-sightedness, any spiritual mediocrity, and let's try to see that our Jesus is not in some sort of vengeful hurry with us. He stands ready at every moment to continue to redeem and heal our lives. So let's seek the patience of Jesus, His grace and His patience for ourselves, but also for those around us. Even now, in this very moment, for those of us who love the Lord even a little, God is at work, and we are being redeemed. So in these especially trying days, let's try to see our lives more clearly. Let's all just take a deep breath, and let's try to take the long view. for the sake of our kindly Jesus. Let's try to make this a patient, unhurried, grace-filled, redemptive day for all those who cross our path. Can we do that today? Bless your hearts.